was thinking last night of that line in Thompson's poem. "'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that miss from any splendid thing."
With youthful energy, he burst on the scene, and the world fell in love with his boyish charm.
He just smiled on the screen, and you could look around, and the whole audience was smiling with him.
But it was his darker roles of flawed heroes and cynical opportunists that earned him the greatest success.
Oh, wake up, Norma. You'd be killing yourself to an empty house. The audience left 20 years ago. Now face it.
When he was a bad guy, he played a bad guy. When he played it tender, he was the most wonderful man you could ever meet.
He was the quintessential leading man. Sexy, every girl's dream.
Although Hollywood embraced its golden boy, William Holden was determined to live on his own terms, and neither fame nor danger could stand in his way. In 1918, Chicago beat to the rhythm of Dixieland bands and the sporadic gunfire of gangsters carving out their territory. But far from the seamy underworld of the Windy City was a quiet farming community, O'Fallon, Illinois. And it was here on April 17th that William Franklin Beedle was born. His mother, Mary, was a strong-willed but pleasant woman who was proud of her strict religious household. Young Bill more resembled his father, William, a soft-spoken man who worked hard to support his family.
He was an industrial chemist, a wiry, lean fellow, sort of an amateur athlete, if you wish. My grandmother was a school teacher, but it was a Midwestern family, close-knit, stay at home, nothing fancy.
In 1921, 3-year-old Bill welcomed a younger brother, Robert Wastfield, who was quickly followed by another boy, Richard Porter. But Bill's father suffered from a chronic lung condition and was urged by doctors to leave the harsh Illinois winters. He took a job in California at Gooch Laboratories and in 1921 moved his family to Monrovia, a rural suburb of Los Angeles. Bill loved Southern California's year-round sunshine and spent all of his time outdoors, roughhousing with his brothers and racing his bicycle around the neighborhood.
The market crashes, October 1929.
As the world plunged into economic depression, millions lost their jobs. Gooch Laboratories was soon on the verge of bankruptcy, and the Beedle family feared losing their livelihood. In a desperate effort, William and Mary scraped together their life savings and took control of the failing fertilizer company. Under William Beedle's business acumen, the company prospered, and in 1931, the family moved to the affluent enclave of South Pasadena. Although less than 10 miles from the sound stages of Hollywood, the exclusive community of orange growers and real estate barons appealed to the morally conservative Beedles. But Bill was shy, and at 13, he found it hard to fit into the wealth-conscious society. Eager to earn a place among his peers, he resorted to audacious, daredevil feats. He terrified his mother by standing on the seat of a motorcycle and won pocket money from his friends by walking along the railing of Suicide Bridge on his hands.
He had a lot of nervous energy. An incredible amount of nervous energy. And he expressed that physically through the stunts he would do or the exercises or the gymnastics he would do.
The 16-year-old longed for a life of thrills and adventure and dreamt of riding in Victor McLaughlin's corps of motorcycle stuntmen. And in order to buy his own Harley-Davidson, Bill worked summers as an errand boy at his father's fertilizer plant. Girls began falling for the handsome and daring youth. His smile broke hearts as he sped through town on his bike, wearing his favorite leather jacket, a cigarette dangling from his lips. On weekends, he now escaped on long rides through the Mojave Desert, imagining adventures in faraway lands. But when Bill finished high school, his carefree youth came to an end. His parents demanded that he choose a practical, secure profession, and the 18-year-old followed their wishes and entered the family fertilizer business.
He went to study chemistry to follow through on his father's wish that he come into the company with him. But he did not like chemistry at all. He didn't like the idea of being locked up as a quote-unquote researcher.
Bill braced himself for a future in chemistry, but in 1936 he took a trip to New York City for one last hurrah. Manhattan was alive with steamy jazz, all-night clubs, and endless energy, and Broadway theaters drew unprecedented crowds. In the riveting performances of actors like Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontanne, Bill Beedle discovered a new and exciting world where performing before an adoring audience left no room for boredom. Although he reluctantly returned to school, he immediately joined a drama club. Soon he was offered a small part in a friend's play entitled Manya at the Pasadena Community Playhouse. The first-time actor was thrilled to be performing at the prestigious local theater, a regular haunt of Hollywood agents and aspiring young thespians who vied anxiously for a chance in the limelight.
Milton Lewis was a talent scout, and Milton had seen him in a play at the Pasadena Community Playhouse, in which he played an 80-year-old man. And he went backstage expecting to see this older man, and here was this young William Beedle.
Lewis immediately invited the handsome young man to Paramount Studios for a screen test. And on January 14th, 1939, 20-year-old William Beedle pulled his motorcycle up to the studio gates, and before the end of the day, he was offered a 7-year contract at $50 a week. But because he was under 21, Bill had to beg his parents to sign the papers.
Nothing was more nebulous at that time than becoming an actor. And Hollywood had a very bad reputation, drinking, partying, any number of possibilities. It represented a deviation from the direction they wanted him to take in life. And they figured that no matter how strong he was, or perhaps how disciplined he was, that eventually Hollywood would take its toll on him. And they said, well, let him try. Although against their heart, against their true feelings about it.
Bill basked in the attention he was now receiving, and eager to please his studio bosses, he even accepted a name change.
A press agent at Paramount says, we got a new actor out here who's got a horrible name, William Beedle. And he called up managing editor at the Los Angeles Times, whose name was William Holden, and asked him for a suggestion. And the guy says, why don't you give him my name? And that was it.
With his striking features and sensual voice, the newly christened William Holden was invited to join an elite corps of young actors called the Golden Circle. Paramount aggressively promoted the promising group, which included Susan Hayward, Robert Preston, and Patricia Morison.
They would send us out on junkets to plug a movie, and we were all young and feisty, and we were sort of like a club. We used to go across the street to a restaurant called Lucy's and spend our lunch hours talking about what we were going to do.
Although Bill doubted the legitimacy of a career based on his good looks, he was quickly caught up in the excitement of Hollywood. Paramount put him to work in bit parts in films like Prison Farm and $1 Million Legs. But as he watched his peers begin to land more substantial roles, Bill worried the studio was overlooking him.
He was wonderful. He was wonderful. He had it. Some people have it. It just has to be shown. But I don't think Paramount saw Bill Holden at all.
Holden feared losing his contract and returning to his father's fertilizer business. He did everything he could to stay in the studio's good graces, even offering to appear in other actors' screen tests, including one for an upcoming film called Golden Boy.
The studio casting director combs all Hollywood, interviews hundreds of young actors to find one capable of playing the title role.
When Holden's test ended up on the desk of Columbia studio chief Harry Cohn, the young actor's luck changed. Struck by Bill's masculine appeal, Cohn announced that he had found his golden boy. Bill Holden knew the stakes were high when he arrived on the set in April of 1939 to star opposite veteran actress Barbara Stanwyck. To relax himself before scenes, the 20-year-old novice would have a drink. But even despite the calming effects of alcohol, he appeared awkward and stiff in front of the camera.
And they got a little skeptical about this young kid, and Harry Cohen was going to let him go. Barbara Stanwyck, bless her heart, went to Cohen and said, if you replace Bill Holden, replace me too. And Barbara Stanwyck was really responsible for Bill staying in the picture.
Based on the award-winning play by Clifford Odets, Golden Boy was the story of greed and manipulation in the life of young boxer Joe Bonaparte.
You've got plenty of speed, but in the wrong direction. See you in 1960. Maybe you'll be somebody by then.
Long before. I'll get what I want. I'll buy that car. Tell your Mr. Moody I'll dazzle the eyes out of his head. Tell him for me he's handling the next world's champ.
He just exploded on the screen. He had the quality of being the boy next door. And all the gals in the country just fell in love with William Holden.
Audiences loved the gritty realism of Golden Boy, and the 21-year-old actor was an overnight sensation. William Holden had found a profession that whet his appetite for adventure. And although he had no idea how long it would last, he was already hungry for more. After only 8 months under studio contract, 21-year-old William Holden was one of Hollywood's new leading men. He split his time between Paramount and Columbia, appearing in a series of character roles from eager cadet to charming outlaw to boy next door in the 1940 film Our Town opposite Martha Scott.
Well, I want to be a farmer, and my Uncle Luke says is whenever I'm ready, I can come over and work on his farm, and if I'm any good at all, I can just gradually have it.
You mean the house and everything?
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess I better be getting off the baseball field. Thanks for the talk, Emily.
Our Town was a box office success, and women were smitten with Holden's boyish charm. But Bill already had his sights set on Warner Brothers' popular leading lady, Brenda Marshall. Her real name was Ardis Ankerson, and before long, she and Bill were inseparable.
She had kind of a quiet sophistication to her. I think she represented a serious side, a more conservative side, and she was kind of cute.
On July 13th, 1941, deftly dodging the press, 23-year-old Bill eloped to Las Vegas with 24-year-old Ardis. Holden took his role as head of the family seriously. He adopted Virginia, Ardis's 3-year-old daughter from her first marriage, and proudly insisted that they live off his weekly income of $150, despite the fact that his film star wife earned 5 times more than he did. In December 1941, the United States declared war, and like thousands of young men, Bill's 20-year-old brother Robert left to fight in the Pacific. Holden hungered to join him in battle and became the first married film star to enlist. But because of his Hollywood status, he was assigned to a public relations unit on a base in Texas. On November 17, 1943, Ardis gave birth to a son, Peter Westfield. But only 2 months later, the couple's joy was overshadowed by tragedy when Bill received the news that his brother had been shot down over the South Pacific Ocean.
Bob was the reasonable, balanced one, the one who could bring things together. He was apparently a warm, engaging person. I think it absolutely bewildered Bill, the thought that they would never see him again.
Holden was overcome with guilt. His brother had died while he was kept safe and sound in the Army's motion picture unit. And for the first time, Bill was ashamed of being an actor. When the war ended, the grief-stricken Bill returned home, more determined than ever to make his mark in Hollywood. But to Holden's surprise, his once promising career had come to a halt. His boyish good looks had been replaced by mature features and a more serious demeanor, and studio executives were unsure how to cast him. By now, Artis had given up her own acting career to be a full-time mother. And when a second son, Scott Porter, was born on May 2nd, 1946, Bill began to worry about his ability to support his family. After 2 frustrating years, Holden finally found work, appearing in Blaze of Noon and Dear Ruth. And in 1948, he starred in 20th Century Fox's Apartment for Peggy, opposite Jean Crane, playing a young GI struggling to adapt to post-war life.
It's no good, Peggy. It won't work.
What won't? What are you talking about?
It's time for me to stop this nonsense and take that job.
But you've got a job, an important job. You're going to be a teacher.
Yeah, and how am I doing it? By making you live in a place like this when guys on relief do better.
But we didn't expect the government to support us completely. It's only supposed to...
I'm not blaming anyone but myself.
Oh, but you shouldn't, darling. You're just tired.
Yes, I'm tired.
Apartment for Peggy was an audience favorite, and critics raved about Holden's new maturity and depth. But his next assignments were in mediocre films that provided little challenge. Now almost 30, Holden was anxious to move beyond the one-dimensional roles that he was still being offered. In 1949, Hollywood was buzzing with gossip about Billy Wilder's racy new project, a dark story about the excesses of Hollywood. Holden was disappointed when Montgomery Clift was cast in the lead, but 2 weeks before production began, Clift backed out, fearing the role would tarnish his image. The part was up for grabs, and Bill lobbied hard to win it.
Bill was already a little anxious about his career. He knew that this part was also dangerous. He could be criticized, he could be ridiculed, but he was brave enough to take it on and handle it.
The role was screenwriter Joe Gillis. The film was Sunset Boulevard.
A murder has been reported from one of those great big houses in the 10,000 block. Nobody important, really. Just a movie writer with a couple of B pictures to his credit. The poor dope. He always wanted a pool.
Co-starring Gloria Swanson and Nancy Olson, Sunset Boulevard was the story of an opportunistic writer turned gigolo lured into the world of a faded silent film star.
Has it ever occurred to you that I may have a life of my own, that there may be some girl that I'm crazy about?
Who? Some car hop or dress extra?
What I'm trying to say is that I'm all wrong for you. You want a Valentino, somebody with polo ponies, a big shot.
What you're trying to say is you don't want me to love you. Say it. Say it.
Over the 3 months of production, Holden poured all his energy into his work, and the long hours of filming were followed by late nights of drinking.
They all drank too much, particularly Bill. But I think that it worked for the role. If he was looking a little seedy, and he had some dark circles under his eyes, and he was a little unsteady, it was completely perfect for the role. The more he came to the set, the more he was Joe Gillis.
What are you doing?
I'm packing.
You're leaving me.
Yes, I am, Norma.
No, you're not. See? You didn't believe me. Now I suppose you don't think I have the courage.
Oh, sure, if it would make a good scene.
You don't care, do you? But hundreds of thousands of people will care.
Oh, wake up, Norma. You'd be killing yourself to an empty house. The audience left 20 years ago. Now face it.
That's a lie! They still want me.
No, they don't.
Although audiences were shocked by the frank subject matter, Sunset Boulevard was nominated for a record-breaking 11 Oscars, including a Best Actor nomination for William Holden. Bill was proud of his work, and when he lost to Jose Ferrer for Cyrano, it was a bitter disappointment. But even without the Oscar, Sunset Boulevard had catapulted Holden to the heights of stardom. Bill's adoring fans were a constant reminder of his popularity, and celebrity magazines published daily accounts of his storybook career and private life. Bill enjoyed spending time at home with his family, relaxing by the backyard pool with Artis, and roughhousing with his sons West and Scott. But the Oscar-nominated actor was caught up in the whirlwind of opportunities now presented to him, and he began spending less and less time at home.
When he was there, he was really there, and you really appreciated it. Christmases are always wonderful moments, you know. The presents would come out, the bicycle, or they were just magic, absolute magic. But he just wasn't there very often. Just working real hard.
Desperately seeking projects that would match the quality of Sunset Boulevard, Holden merely shuttled between Paramount and Columbia, appearing in a series of action roles. In 1953, he was hopeful when Billy Wilder chose him to play a self-serving GI in Stalag 17, a caustic World War II comedy.
Yeah, life was confining, but never dull in Stalag 17. The boys were up to something new every minute. And if you think everything was roses, it wasn't. Stalag 17 was a hellhole where no man ever escaped alive.
Just one more word. If I ever run into any of you bums on a street corner, just let's pretend we never met before.
The film was an immediate financial and critical success, and Bill earned his second Academy Award nomination.
Pantages Theater, it's the motion picture industry's night of nights, and William Holden is called forward to receive the Oscar for the top male performance.
On March 25, 1954, William Holden proudly accepted the Academy Award for Best Actor. But after 15 years in Hollywood, Holden knew the real value of the Oscar, and he had every intention of exploiting it to his full advantage. In 1954, William Holden emerged from the fanfare of the Oscars, determined to take his career into his own hands. He began by renegotiating his contract with Paramount, and that year reunited with Billy Wilder for Sabrina, starring Humphrey Bogart and Audrey Hepburn.
There's no doubt about it, they're having a ball, and you're all invited. Humphrey Bogart and William Holden as the two wealthiest brothers in America, and captivating Audrey Hepburn as Sabrina, the chauffeur's daughter, who ran away to Paris to learn about life and came back home to live it in a great big way.
It's Sabrina. Isn't it amazing? Would you have recognized her? How do you like those legs now, David? Aren't they something?
David, the last pair of legs that was something cost the family $25,000.
Bill Holden stands his engagement party on its ear when he shows up with Sabrina instead of his fiancée.
Oh, Sabrina, Sabrina, where have you been all my life?
Right over the garage.
Holden was taken with his leading lady, both on screen and off, and the two began a passionate romance. Deeply in love, Bill was even prepared to sacrifice his marriage to Artis. But Audrey longed to start a family, and when Bill told her that he could no longer have children because of a vasectomy, the 25-year-old actress broke off the relationship. Months later, when Audrey publicly announced her engagement to Mel Ferrer, Bill was heartbroken. Although he reconciled with his wife, the atmosphere at home was tense, and his drinking only made matters worse. On the advice of Billy Wilder, Holden decided to travel abroad. He discovered the treasures of Europe and then continued on to the exotic lands of Hong Kong and Japan.
This man's curiosity was absolutely insatiable when it came to traveling. He just had that kind of curiosity, a need to know. Maybe it brought something to him. Maybe it brought a lift. And so that became his true vocation in life, and acting became the vehicle which permitted him to do that.
Enamored with foreign cultures, the 36-year-old actor stayed in Japan to star in Paramount's The Bridges at Toko-ri, opposite Grace Kelly.
The Bridges at Toko-ri, crossroads of destiny for these unforgettable characters.
Harry, you've got to tell me about those bridges.
They're just sitting there, waiting for us, hoping they'll come.
The location was not the only attraction of the film. Bill had once again started a behind-the-scenes romance with his seductive co-star. Artists lashed out bitterly at Bill, but despite their continuing difficulties, the couple was unwilling to end their 13-year marriage.
My father didn't want divorce because he sort of felt that the family unit should stay together and that as adults they could deal with the rest of the dalliances and affairs.
Stay very still.
Why?
A butterfly has perched on your shoulder. It's a sign of good luck.
In 1955, 20th Century Fox cast Holden opposite Jennifer Jones in Love is a Many Splendored Thing, the story of a forbidden romance between a Eurasian doctor and a married American journalist.
Oh, pity the poor people with their sad faces who have missed what we have.
You know, I was thinking last night of that line in Thompson's poem. "'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that miss the many splendid thing."
The film was a hit, and Holden's string of commercial successes remained unbroken. And in 1956, the Theater Owners of America voted him the biggest money-making star of the year, surpassing even John Wayne, Gary Cooper, and Gregory Peck. For his final contractual obligation to Columbia, 37-year-old Holden was cast in Picnic, the story of a charismatic drifter who stirs up emotions in a small Midwestern town. Starring opposite Cliff Robertson and Kim Novak, Holden played the shiftless Hal Carter.
There comes a time in a man's life when he's got to quit rolling around like a pinball. Maybe a little town like this. Place to settle down. Hi.
Hi.
There's a question he might be a little old for the part of Hal, but his main apprehension was that dance with Kim Novak. He kept saying, "Hell, Cliff, I can't dance. They got me dancing. I'm supposed to be some kind of a sexy dance."
Hoping to pressure Columbia into cutting the scene, Holden demanded an $8,000 stunt fee for dancing. But to his chagrin, the studio agreed to pay. Picnic triumphed at the box office, and Holden's dance became one of the most memorable moments of the film. But dancing was only one of Bill's lessons from Picnic. The film had also taught him how to play hardball with the studio brass. And when Columbia offered Bill a part in David Lean's The Bridge on the River Kwai, he shrewdly muscled producers to secure the most profitable contract ever given an actor. His salary plus 10% of the film's profits.
No one ever pulled anything on Bill Holden. I mean, he was a tough businessman. He knew what he should be paid, and he made sure he got it. Yeah, he had a lot of fights with the front office, mostly over salary.
The Bridge on the River Kwai was the story of a battle of wills in a Japanese war camp. Holden was cast as Shears, an opportunistic GI goaded into heroism.
You'll go on without me. That's an order.
You make me sick with your heroics. There's a stench of death about you. You carry it in your pack like the plague. You and that Colonel Nicholson, you're two of a kind. Crazy with courage. For what? How to die like a gentleman. How to die by the rules. When the only important thing is how to live like a human being.
The Bridge on the River Kwai opened to immense success and sealed Holden's image as a self-serving hero equally loved and loathed. And it also earned him more than $3 million in its first release. By 1957, half of his life had been devoted to acting, and he had proven that he was one of the screen's greatest talents. But at the age of 40, William Holden knew that Hollywood stardom would never be enough. By 1958, William Holden was feeling self-conscious about his profession. Now 40, he thought that acting was a frivolous way for a grown man to make a living, and he wanted to prove his worth in more serious ventures. He invested heavily in manufacturing companies in Asia and now referred to himself as a businessman.
And he used to say to me, hell, I'm not an actor. He had that sense that maybe the success we've had or the good fortunes we've had, we don't deserve. We don't deserve recognition. It's fraudulent. And there was a sense of undeserving in Bill Holden.
In the summer of 1959, Holden surprised his family when he announced that they were moving to Lausanne, Switzerland.
This decision was made without our having anything to say about it. Just up and went. He said, this is the beginning of a new life for me. It's the beginning of a new life for you. And I think you'll learn something from it. And then he was off working. Off he goes again.
But the move did little to help Bill and Artis's difficult 18-year marriage, and he once again began drinking heavily. He traveled restlessly from one continent to another, chasing every opportunity for thrills and adventure. In 1959, he visited Africa for the first time, joining a friend on a wild safari. But although Bill had gone as a hunter, the vast beauty of the land and its animals inspired something more in him.
He loved Kenya, he loved Africa. It's sort of like a step back in time. And you smell it. It's in the air, it's wild. I guess you're in contact with yourself a little bit more when you're in a place where your life could be on the line 15 minutes away from your home, you know.
Bill purchased 2,000 acres in Kenya with the dream of creating a protected animal reserve. Although Holden now had investments worldwide, acting remained his principal source of income. And in 1964, he lobbied hard to persuade 20th Century Fox to shoot his next film, The Lion, on location in Africa.
William Holden, Trevor Howard, Capucine, and Pamela Franklin as Tina in Samuel G. Engel's production, The Lion.
William Holden played a divorced lawyer trying to reestablish a relationship with his young daughter.
They're my friends. They trust me. They don't know you.
Do you know who I am?
You used to be my father.
I still am.
If you'd really love me, you would come to see me sometime, somehow. Animals don't forget their cubs.
Holden was disappointed when The Lion flopped at the box office and escaped to France for his next project, Paris When It Sizzles, co-starring Audrey Hepburn. But working closely with his former love proved too difficult for him, and for the first time in his career, Bill's constant drinking slowed production. Even he was forced to realize that drinking was getting the best of him, and he quietly sought help.
He started an outright war taking cures in Paris. And these are not fun cures, believe me. 2 or 3 times he went at. But he just didn't seem to be able to completely remove alcohol from his life.
But while Bill fought to control his drinking, he was unable to curb his increasingly reckless behavior. One night, while speeding down the Italian autostrada, Holden collided with another car. And although Bill suffered only minor injuries, the driver of the second car was killed. On October 26, 1967, 49-year-old William Holden was convicted of manslaughter.
He was devastated by that accident. The fact that he killed somebody driving a vehicle absolutely threw him for a major loop. He could, this was not war, this was driving a car, a sports car in Italy.
Holden was given an 8-month suspended sentence. He refused to talk about the accident, and his withdrawal further strained his relationship with Artis. After more than 25 years together, the couple decided to divorce. Bill felt nothing but guilt over the failure of his marriage and grew despondent and even more isolated. But in 1969, director Sam Peckinpah saw the character of Pike Bishop in Holden's weathered face and convinced him to accept the lead in his revisionist western, The Wild Bunch. Shooting in the rough terrain of northern Mexico, Bill became close friends with co-star Ernest Borgnine and gradually began to regain his youthful energy and enthusiasm.
He had a great sense of humor and loved to be a kid again, you know? You could see the spark light up in his eyes. And it was just wonderful to watch it because you knew something was going to happen. And everybody had a ball with him, you know?
With the release of The Wild Bunch, Holden proved that at age 51, he was still one of Hollywood's most popular leading men. But it was disaster movies that were the hot ticket at the box office. And in 1974, Bill banked on the trend by starring in Irwin Allen's The Towering Inferno with superstars Paul Newman and Steve McQueen. Bill felt at ease with the new generation of leading men and was often caught joking around on the relaxed set.
Doug, you're a city boy with a low sense of...
At the age of 56, Bill Holden seemed to have regained his professional momentum. And when he met Stephanie Powers at a friend's party, his personal life fell into place as well.
We were both insatiably curious about the world and about traveling in places that were a bit unconventional. It was very interesting and uncanny how much we shared.
William Holden looked to his future with a renewed enthusiasm. And at 57, he refused to believe that his most significant accomplishments were behind him. At the age of 58, William Holden was happy with his personal life and proud of his professional accomplishments. In 1976, he joined Faye Dunaway, Robert Duvall, and Peter Finch in Sidney Lumet's Network, a scathing portrait of television journalism. The film won rave reviews and garnered 10 Oscar nominations, including one for William Holden. But Bill lost the Oscar when it was posthumously awarded to Peter Finch. He tried to keep up the momentum of his career by accepting a role in 20th Century Fox's Damien, a sequel to the cult classic The Omen.
The terror of the past is but a taste of the future.
Playing uncle to the modern Antichrist, Holden starred opposite Lee Grant and Jonathan Scott Taylor.
Damien has a different cell structure.
Oh, please, please, you must listen to me. You can't make...
Got to believe it. He killed Mark, killed Atherton and Sarian, and he'll keep on killing. He'll kill anyone he thinks is threatening him.
Listen to yourself. Listen to how crazy you sound.
Man, I saw Charles killed. I saw Damien's face on the wall.
Although Damien did well at the box office, the film and Holden received only mediocre reviews. In 1980, Holden traveled to the Australian outback for his next film, The Earthling, to star with 7-year-old Ricky Schroder in the story of a dying man who takes an orphan boy under his wing.
He was just a very fatherly figure to me for those 3 months when we were in Australia. I remember one of his favorite things to do was to read maps, and for hours he would sit hunched over maps looking at different exotic places that I guess he dreamed to go. And I would sit there next to him a little bit, and I became a big fan of maps too.
But the film was a flop, and with no new roles in front of him, Bill Holden was painfully reminded that his accomplishments had not lived up to his expectations.
Bill was typical of an actor who's, hailed in the world, but then at a certain point realizes that, he didn't invent the cure for polio, He began to think that what he did was far less important than what he might be able to do.
In 1980, Bill retreated to his wildlife preserve in Kenya, where he devoted all of his energy to the animal sanctuary and worked on his plans for an educational foundation.
Words fail me when I try to describe what the feeling of being here and in our particular case, involved with conservation and wildlife. It's just something that has to be experienced.
Friends urged him to stay in Africa, where he was the healthiest he had been in years. But the next year, when Holden returned to Hollywood to star in Blake Edwards' S.O.B., drinking problem worked and began
times that it was complicated by a bad bout of alcoholism, and whenever we started thinking about it, it wasn't the optimum time. In hindsight, probably.
Bill struggled to keep his life together, and he distracted himself with plans for future projects. But when he failed to appear at several meetings, friends grew concerned and made repeated efforts to contact him. On Monday morning, November 16th, 1981, 63-year-old William Holden was found dead in his Santa Monica apartment. In a highly publicized press conference, Los Angeles coroner Thomas Noguchi ruled out foul play and attributed the death to a forehead injury sustained from a fall while intoxicated. Newspapers immediately jumped on the sensationalistic report, and the headlines told stories of Holden's inability to save himself. Noguchi was chided by the LA supervisors for his over-dramatic presentation, and those closest to Holden felt that the complete story had been lost in the flurry of public scandal.
When I read about the end, when it said he was there with the cloth up to the wound and the phone within reach, but he never reached for the phone, and they said he was probably too drunk, and they're wrong. He was probably too proud.
Today, in Africa, Bill's dream of animal preservation and conservation education live on at the William Holden Wildlife Foundation.
His work in Africa was the thing he, I think, was really most proud of. And the William Holden Wildlife Foundation is an extension of his dreams for the future. When he wanted to do something, he would make the impossible happen.
The sky is clear. It is a good omen for the moon festival.
I arranged a full moon for you.
Throughout his life, William Holden chased adventure and dodged boredom. From the audacious characters that made him one of Hollywood's most popular leading men to his work for African wildlife conservation, Holden never lost his daredevil spirit.
William Holden was one of the finest, most courageous, most wonderful men. He was a man's man.
I still think of him as being the perfect movie star.
He was a real person, down to earth and full of surprises. He was a good man.